So, good evening everybody.
So, guten Abend allerseits.
Let us open with prayer.
Lasst uns mit Gebet anfangen.
Himmlischer Vater,
Dear Heavenly Father,
danke, dass du uns wieder hier alle zusammengebracht hast.
thank you that you've gathered us here once again.
Bitte hilf uns jetzt, dass wir ein gutes Studium haben und dass wir die Dinge, die uns erklärt werden, gut verstehen.
Please help us that we would have a good study in the things that are explained to us, that we would understand them.
Bitte segne Bruder Lorenz, wenn er vorträgt, und Bruder Scott, wenn er übersetzt.
Please bless Brother Lawrence as he presents and Brother Scott when he translates.
In Jesu Namen.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Pick up the notes into people. Okay, so today we will look at this time cut short.
So, heute werden wir diese Zeit, die abgekürzt ist, anschauen.
And
Die Notizen kommen gleich in der Livestream zu uns.
so, English should be here now.
Da sind die englischen Notizen.
And German ones.
Und die deutschen folgen gleich.
Right. Okay. So everybody has the notes.
So, jeder Zugang zu den Notizen.
So let's go to Genesis 41,
So, zuerst gehen wir zu 1. Buch Mose
and
41.
we will now remind ourselves a little bit about a few points we looked at this past seminar.
Und ein paar Punkten, die wir in diesem Wochenendseminar betrachtet haben, werden wir jetzt in Erinnerung bringen.
For this line here is the line of the Sunday law,
So, diese Linie hier ist der Linie des Sonntagsgesetzes.
and we understand all these chapters of the book of Daniel. They all start here at the Sunday law.
Und all diese Kapitel in der Buch Daniels fängen hier am Sonntagsgesetz an.
Okay, so in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream here at the Sunday law,
Und
right?
Daniel Kapitel 2, Nebukadnezar hat diesen Traum am Sonntagsgesetz
And he doesn't understand it,
und er versteht es nicht
and he then calls the magicians.
und er ruft die Magiker
And 3 times leads you to the midnight cry, and then he puts this death decree in place.
So, und dreimal können sie nichts antworten, führt zur Mitternachtsruf und er gibt diesen Todesdekret her.
And then Daniel, he prays, and eventually he gets this revelation.
Und Daniel dann betet und erhielt diese Offenbarung.
And then here at the end, he stands at this little tent
Und dann hier am Ende, da steht er hier an diesen kleinen Zehen
and gives the prediction. Right?
und gibt der Vorhersage dem König.
And what does the prediction do for him?
Und was tut diese Vorhersage für ihn?
Yes, he delivers him from this death decree.
So,
Right?
es erlöst ihn, es befreit ihn von diesem Todesdekret.
Okay, so and the parallel story to Daniel 2 is Genesis 41. Right?
Und der Parallelgeschichte zu Daniel Kapitel 2 ist eben 1. Buch Mose
Because
41.
there is the same story, and Pharaoh has the dream and calls the magicians, can explain.
So, da ist derselbe Geschichte. Pharao hat einen Traum, er rief die Magiker, die können es ihm nicht erklären.
And then let's read now what happens here in Genesis 41.
Und jetzt lesen wir, was geschieht in 1. Buch Mose 41,
Let's read verse 14.
die Vers 14.
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. Okay, so, and also turn your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2.
So geht in euren Bibeln zu Daniel Kapitel 2 jetzt.
So how was Joseph brought in?
So,
Vor
wie
Pharao.
ist Josef vor den Pharao gebracht?
25 by Ariel.
No, Joseph.
Also Josef.
Joseph by the butler.
Yes,
In
But
Eile.
Hastily.
hastily.
Also der
Okay.
ist in Eile vor dem König geschleppt.
And let's read now verse 24 and 25 in Daniel 2.
Und jetzt in Daniel 2, die Verse 24, 25.
Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, Destroy not the wise men of Babylon, bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of the Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. So Daniel was also brought in haste, right?
Vers 25, Daniel würde auch in Eile vor den König gebracht.
Okay, so therefore we can see this symbol of haste in here. right?
So, hier können wir sehen, dieses Symbol des Beeilen hier gebracht.
And then you basically give this prediction there.
Und dann gibst du diese Vorhersage hier.
And then when we jump down to verse 26 and 27,
Und wenn wir jetzt zu die Verse 26, 27 gehen,
or even until verse 28,
oder sogar 26 bis
Das-
28,
King answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, The secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. So who makes known this dream to him?
so wer macht diesen Traum den Nebuchadnezzar bekannt?
God of heaven.
The God of heaven,
Der
right?
Gott im Himmel.
So now let's go back to Genesis 41 in the notes.
So jetzt in 1. Buch Mose 41 in den Notizen.
So here it says, Joseph has brought in hastily,
So hier sagt es, dass Josef in Eile vor dem Pharao geschleppt wird.
and then it says in verse 15 and 16,
Die Verse 15 und 16
and,
sagen es jetzt.
and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it, and I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand the dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Okay, so who's interpreting this dream?
So wer legt diesen Traum aus?
Also God.
Es
Right?
ist auch Gott.
So we can clearly see these parallels between these two stories.
So wir können klar diese Parallelen zwischen diese zwei Geschichten sehen.
And what did Daniel say to Arioch here?
Und was sagte Daniel zu Arioch hier? Don't kill them.
Don't kill the wise man, right?
So tötet den Weisen nicht.
So the destroyer was stayed.
Also der Zerstörer würde gestoppt.
And this, we also looked then at the story of Abigail.
Und das haben wir durch die Geschichte von Abigail geschaut.
So let's go there in 1 Samuel 25.
In den Notizen 1. Samuel 25
And let's read verse 13.
und wir lesen Vers 13.
It says, And David sent unto his men, Gird ye on every man his sword, and they girded on every man his sword. And David also girded on his sword, and there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the staff. So what is David now about to do?
So, was wird David jetzt bald tun?
He's making a death decree basically.
Yes.
He's deciding he's going to kill them.
Yes.
Also David hat ein Todesdekret erlassen, weil er schon bereits entschieden hat, dass er ihn töten wird.
So the destroyer is on its way here,
Also
right?
der Zerstörer, der ist auf seinem Weg hier,
Like Arioch wants to destroy all the wise men.
genauso wie Arioch alle Weisen zerstören wird.
But here, right, David got delivered.
Aber hier ist
Not David, Daniel.
Hier ist Daniel befreit worden.
And also Joseph got delivered out of prison.
Und
Right?
auch Josef wurde aus Gefängnis befreit.
And it was when they were brought hastily before the king.
Und es war, wenn sie in Eile vor dem König geschleppt waren.
So write down deliverance.
So, ich schreibe hier Befreiung.
Okay, and what happens here now in the story of Abigail?
Und was geschieht hier in der Geschichte von Abigail?
Verse 18.
Vers 18.
Then Abigail made haste
Abigail auch, machte eilig.
and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs and laid them on asses. And she said unto her servants, Go on before me, behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband. Okay, so she makes also haste to meet now David, right?
So, sie geht jetzt in Eile David entgegen.
I thought about this, right?
Ich habe Gedanken darüber gemacht.
When Daniel speaks to Arioch the first time, he says, why is the decree so hasty?
So, wenn Daniel zu Arioch das erste Mal spricht, er bittet, warum ist dieses Dekret so eilig?
Right? And
That's
I
gerade
think
hier.
that this haste here is, she hears about the death decree and she makes haste, but this,
Second haste.
the second haste is
Yes,
when
yes.
she meets him there.
Okay.
Also, you think this is where she makes haste to meet him? Is that what you
Yes, she's,
Okay.
she's making preparations for,
Also
for this point.
sie hört über diesen Todesdekret hier und sie eilt in Vorbereitung hier. Diese zweite Eile hier ist, wenn sie David trifft.
Yes, because in verse 23, when we go to verse 23,
Denn im Vers 23,
it says, And when Abigail saw David, she
Haste.
hasted
genau.
and lighted off the ass and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground.
Also wenn sie David sah, sie eilte wieder hier. In
This
Vers
is now where
23.
she's giving the offering.
Yes.
So hier gibt sie das Opfergabe da.
Okay, so, and what is she doing here with her servants?
So was tut sie hier mit ihren Dienern?
Send them before him like Jacob.
Yes, like Jacob, right?
So wie Jakob, sie schickt sie vor.
Because in the story of Jacob, who comes against Jacob?
Denn in der Geschichte von Jakob, wer kommt gegen ihn?
Esau, with how many men? Yes, 400.
Esau mit seinem 400.
So here's always the destroyer comes against you.
So hier der Zerstörer kommt gegen dich.
So destroyer
In haste.
comes,
Der Zerstörer kommt.
and here destroyer is restrained.
Und hier der Zerstörer wird gestoppt oder zurückgehalten.
Okay, so all right, and she basically, yeah, she gives them when she lights off here the ass and gives the offering.
Und hier, wenn sie vom Esel runterkommt und das Opfergabe darbringt,
What does she do? She
Begins to intercede.
yeah, she begins to intercede, right?
sie fängt an, Fürbitte zu tun.
Let's read verse 24.
Lasst uns Vers 24 lesen.
It says, And fell at his feet and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be, and let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thine handmaid. And then she intercedes for Nabal.
Und dann tut sie Fürbitte danach für Nabal.
But she also, in verse 28,
Aber in Vers 28 tut sie auch noch,
she basically makes a prediction, and she
Prophesies.
yes, and she basically reveals that she believes the promise.
sie macht hier eine Vorhersage, sie macht Prophezeiung und sie zeigt, dass sie die Verheißung glaubt.
Because she says basically that she understands that the Lord said David will be king.
Weil sie versteht, dass der Herr gesagt hat, dass David König wird.
It says, I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thy handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make thy Lord a sure house. Because my Lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. Okay, so, and then she tells her husband, and after how many days does he die?
Dann erzählt sie ihrem Ehemann, und nach wie vielen Tagen stirbt Nabal?
10 days,
Nach
right?
10 Tagen.
So,
She marries him.
Nabal dies.
So, Nabal stirbt.
And now let's read verse 38 and 39.
So, lasst uns die Verse 38, 39 lesen.
It says, And it came to pass about 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal, that he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord, that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil, for the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. So what happens with Nabal?
So was geschieht mit Nabal?
It becomes a scapegoat.
Yes,
All the
the,
sins put upon him.
yes, sins comes on.
So, wird zur Sündenbock, die Sünden kommen auf seinen eigenen Haupt zurück.
Own head. Okay. And then it says,
Und dann sagt es,
and David sent in communion with Abigail to take her to him to wife. Okay, so it's also a marriage marketing.
so David nimmt den Abigail zur Frau, hier ist auch eine Hochzeit markiert.
Okay, so far can everybody follow?
So kann jeder folgen.
Okay, it's just revision, right?
So, das ist hier nur Wiederholung.
Okay, now let's go to Daniel 6.
So, lasst uns jetzt zu Daniel 6 gehen.
Because in Daniel 6 we also know it's the Sunday law where they make this decree. Nobody is to worship anybody beside the king for 30 days.
Denn in Daniel 6, wir wissen, es ist der Sonntagsgesetz, es ist ein Dekret gemacht, erlassen worden. Niemand soll anbeten, außer der König 30 Tage lang.
And then Daniel is cast into the lion's den.
Und dann wird Daniel in der Löwengrube geworfen.
He comes face to face with the destroyer,
Daniel kommt vor dem Angesicht der Zerstörer
with these lions.
mit diesen Löwen.
Okay, and then verse 19.
Und jetzt Vers 19.
Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. Okay, so here we are now here. Okay,
So, wir sind gerade hier.
so he comes in haste now,
Er kommt in Eile.
and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake unto Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, I have done no hurt. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So what happens to Daniel here?
So, was geschieht mit Daniel hier?
He's delivered, right?
Er wird befreit.
Okay. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And I forgot to put the next verse in. Let's go to Daniel 6.
Vergessen, es soll noch ein Vers da sein, also gehen wir in unsere Bibeln zu Daniel 6.
Verse 24.
Vers 24.
In the German, I think it's 25.
In Deutsch ist es Vers 25.
It says, And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast him into the den of lions. Then the children and the wives and the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all the bones in pieces, wherever they came at the bottom of the den. Okay, so what happens now with the wicked?
So, was geschieht mit den Bösen hier?
Same as what happened.
Yes, same with, yes, came upon the head. Right?
Dasselbe wie Nabal, es kam auf ihrem eigenen Haupt zurück.
Okay, so we see the same pattern over and over again.
So, derselbe Muster können wir wieder und wieder sehen.
And when they got delivered, when Daniel got delivered, what was not upon him?
Und als Daniel befreit wurde, was war nicht auf ihm?
No heart upon
No
him.
manner of hurt. Right?
Also keine Art von Verletzung.
And that's the same as in Daniel chapter
3.
3,
Und
right?
das ist dasselbe wie in Daniel Kapitel 3.
Because in Daniel chapter 3,
Denn in Daniel Kapitel 3,
the three friends get cast into the fiery furnace,
die
right?
3 Freunde werden im Feuerofen geworfen,
But then they also get delivered,
aber sie werden auch befreit.
and no smell of fire and burning was
It says
upon
the same
them.
thing.
Right?
as
Noch nicht mal ein Geruch von Feuer oder
Yes.
Brand oder Rauch war auf sie.
Yes, so let's go quickly to Daniel 3,
So lasst uns schnell zu Daniel 3, ist auch in den Notizen,
verse 24.
Vers 24.
Okay. It says, Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste.
Er ist aufgestanden in Eile.
So again are here when he rose up in haste.
So wieder sind wir hier, wo er in Eile aufsteht.
And spake and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of Man. So in what condition are they now?
So in welchem Zustand sind sie jetzt?
They have no heart.
Yes, they're no hurt and they are loosed, right?
Sie haben keine Verletzung und die sind lose. also losgebunden, gelöst.
Verse 26, then
Vers
Nebuchadnezzar
26.
came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake unto this, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. So what do we have marked here when they get delivered?
So, was haben wir hier markiert, wenn sie befreit werden?
Come forth and come hither.
So,
Okay.
kommt hier und kommt herauf.
Yes. Okay.
You just mark it at the beginning of the tent.
And then verse,
So you mark what at the beginning?
come forth and come hither.
No, I don't think so. That's when you come out of the grave, right? That's because he comes to the beginning, and then he like in Daniel 6, he comes at the beginning, he shouts, "Oh Daniel, as the God delivered you, this is the beginning point." But then when he takes you out, he's immediately, you're delivered and they get the punishment, but that has to be in the end, surely. It's like you don't see a prediction there, but you definitely see a beginning point and then an end point.
Okay, so you mean in the sense that come forth, come hither is then when you come out of the womb?
Yes, I think that's how I would understand it, right at the end. It's like Belshazzar also, and Nebuchadnezzar, he, I can't remember what he says, but what was it he said again? Yeah, because in verse 24 it says, then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste. So he marks the beginning when he sees them, and then he says something just like Darius says, is he able to save you? And here Nebuchadnezzar says, lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. So they both are at this point, right? But then they make this command, come forth and come hither, right? In Daniel 3 is the same as...
So that would be then the loosed here, where they're in the fire loosed, and that would be come forth and come hither. So here they're coming out of prison, even though they're still in the fire.
They're delivered when they get
They're
loosed.
delivered when they're loosed, right?
They're delivered when they're loosed, but when they come out of the fire, that's the second deliverance.
Okay. Also in diesem Fall, wenn Nebukadnezar sieht sie im Feuer, wenn Christus da ist, da sind sie bereits befreit worden, weil sie sind ungebunden, obwohl sie noch im Feuer sind. Und hier, wo Nebukadnezar sagt, kommt heraus und kommt hierauf, das ist quasi das Gebot, also der zweite Befreiung am Ende.
Okay, I have no problem with this at the moment. Okay.
Because just one last point, when Darius comes to Lion's Den, the first deliverance is when he opens the stone. That's really, you're being delivered right there, and then he speaks to him, and then he takes him out of the den. That's the second part, so you've got the beginning.
Yes.
Daniel 6, das erste Befreiung wäre dann, wenn er die Steine aufmacht und mit ihm spricht, zu sehen, dass er okay ist. Und der zweite Befreiung, wenn er tatsächlich
Also Gabriel, he also came to Christ's tomb, right? He rolled away the stone and then said, come forth.
Yes.
Also Gabriel kam zur Grab von Christus und hat den Stein weggerollt und sagt, kommt heraus oder kommt fort.
Come forth, that means you're now out of the belly, you come forth. Right?
Also kommt heraus, das ist aus dem Bauch.
Because
Das ist geboren.
because in Revelation 11, that's when everybody fears, because that's the prediction coming.
Also in Offenbarung 11, wenn du da auferweckt wirst, da fürchtet sich jedermann, weil da ist die Vorhersage, die zutrifft.
Yes. Okay, so up to this point everybody could follow, right?
So bislang kann jeder folgen.
Okay, so therefore I want to make this point that here you get delivered already.
So ich möchte diesen Punkt hier machen, dass gerade hier bist du bereits befreit.
But your experience lasts until the end, okay?
Aber diese Erfahrung dauert an bis zur Ende.
But I want to show you that basically this is already the end,
Aber
the beginning of the end, okay?
Ich möchte zeigen, dass das hier bereits das Ende ist oder das Anfang vom Ende.
Because we already looked at this at Mount Carmel.
Denn wir haben das bereits bei Berg Karmel angeschaut.
When does Elijah begin?
Wann fängt Elia an? an der 9. Stunde.
9th hour, right? Everybody can remember? Or
Kann
should
jeder
we-
erinnern?
Yes. So he begins at the 9th hour.
Er fängt an der 9. Stunde an.
And when does the fire come down?
Und wann kommt das Feuer herab?
At the 9th hour.
Am
Right?
9. Stunde.
Okay. And Ezekiel 1 verse 1, when does it start?
Und Hesekiel 1, Vers 1, wann fängt das an?
On the 5th day of the 4th month, right?
5. Tag des 4. Monats.
Which is at the beginning of this 10, right?
Was am Anfang von diesen 10 ist.
Yes?
Ja?
Yes.
Amen.
Okay, so midnight begins here at the beginning,
So, Mitternacht fängt hier am Anfang
just
an.
like the 9th hour.
Genauso wie der 9. Stunde.
But, for instance, the angel of death in Egypt, when did it smite the first one?
Aber der Engel des Todes in Ägypten, wann hat es den Erstgeborenen erschlagen?
At midnight,
Um
right?
Mitternacht.
Which is the end, which is the punishment at
Was
the
das
end, right?
Ende ist, was die Bestrafung am Ende ist.
So you can see that all this is midnight and all this is the 9th hour.
So, man
Okay.
kann sehen, dass das Gesamte ist Mitternacht und das Gesamte ist der 9. Stunde.
So in the 9th hour is the end, right?
Und das 9. Stunde ist eben das Ende.
So all this here is the end.
So, all das hier ist das Ende.
Okay. So therefore also this here is the end.
So, das wäre dann auch hier dasselbe, das Ende.
Everybody can follow?
Kann jeder folgen?
Okay, but this end basically he stretches out and it has a beginning of the end and an end of the end.
Aber diese Ende, er dehnt es aus und es gibt einen Anfang zu dieser Endphase und ein Ende zu dieser Endphase.
It's even like Josiah Litch, right?
Das ist genauso wie Jesaja Litch.
He predicted 391 years, right?
Er sagte 391 Jahre voraus.
But so the 391 years only brought him to the year 1840, but at the last moment was like 10 days before. What's the point I'm trying to make? It's like
391 Jahre brachte ihm nur zu das Jahr 1840. Aber diese,
doesn't matter. Maybe that thought's not valid. I was just thinking the fact that he makes this prediction right at the last moment.
aber gerade an der letzten Moment macht er diese Vorhersage, also die genauere Vorhersage.
No, it doesn't matter. Maybe it's a different thought.
Okay.
Aber vielleicht ist das eine andere Gedanke.
So now I wanna just put another thought into place, but which is connected with this. Okay.
Aber jetzt möchte ich eine weitere Gedanke aufstellen, aber natürlich in Verbindung mit das, was wir hier machen.
Okay, let's go to page 2 at the very bottom.
So,
Matthew
Seite
24.
2 auf den Notizen ganz unten, also Matthäus 24,
It speaks about the great tribulation here.
spricht über der große Trübsal.
It says, "For that shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." So what should happen to the great tribulation?
So, was soll geschehen, diese große Zeit des Trübsals?
Okay, cut short.
Cut short,
Es
right?
wird abgekürzt werden.
Okay, then it says here, the persecution of the church, in the next quote,
Nächstes Zitat sagt
did
es.
not continue throughout the entire period of the 1260 years. God in mercy to his people cut short the time of the fiery trial. So the fiery trials, also this, for instance, this fiery oven, right?
Also diese feurige Prüfung, das wäre dann natürlich auch das Feuerofen.
In foretelling the great tribulation to before the church, the Savior said, "Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." Through the influence of the Reformation, the persecution was brought to an end prior to 1798. Okay, so it lasted until 1798,
So, es dauerte bis 1798 an,
but the persecution was already cut short a little bit beforehand.
aber die Verfolgung würde ein kleines Stück davor gestoppt.
Okay, and the 1260, where is it perfectly applied?
Und die 1260, wo soll das perfekterweise angewandt werden?
It's the seven last
Yeah,
places.
seven last
7
plagues, right?
letzten Plagen.
So that's the 7 last plagues up here.
Hier 7 letzten Plagen hier oben,
That's 1260, right?
1260.
Okay, and it says here in the next quote,
Und der nächste Zitat sagt es,
let's just read the boldface.
wir lesen nur das Fettgedruckte.
In the Savior's conversation with his disciples upon Olivet, after describing the long period of trial for the church, the 1260 years of the papal persecution, concerning which he had promised that the tribulation should be shortened. Then the next boldface, the 1260 days or years terminated in 1798. A quarter of a century earlier, persecution had almost wholly ceased. Following this persecution, according to the words of Christ, the sun was to be darkened. Okay, so, and now let's go, and we'll come back to this quote.
Also wir werden zu diesem Zitat zurückkommen.
But let's jump over the next Bible verses and to the next. Let's go to the next quote.
Aber wir überspringen die nächsten Bibelversen und gehen zu der nächsten Zitat.
And
Und auf Seite 3.
This next quote is speaking about the 7 last plagues.
Und diese nächste Zitat spricht über die 7 letzten
So
Plagen.
let's read the boldfaced.
So, wir lesen das Fettgedruckte.
But they must wait yet a little longer. The people of God must drink of the cup and be baptized with the baptism. So they must endure the 7 last plagues.
So, die mussten die 7 letzten Plagen aushalten.
The very delay, so painful to them, is the best answer to their petitions. As they endeavor to wait trustingly for the Lord to work, they are led to exercise faith, hope and patience, which have been too little exercised during their religious experience. Yet for the elect's sake, the time of trouble will be shortened. Okay? So what happens with the 7 last plagues?
So, was geschieht mit den 7 letzten Plagen?
Will be shortened.
Die werden verkürzt.
Shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. The end will come more quickly than men expect. So what will come more quickly than we expect?
So, was wird schneller kommen als das, was man erwartet? Das Ende.
Okay, so therefore what I want to suggest is
So, was ich denn vorschlagen möchte, ist,
that here at the end of the 7 last plagues,
so hier am Ende der 7 letzten Plagen,
the Lord also cuts short the 7 last plagues.
der
Okay?
Herr auch kürzt den 7 letzten Plagen ab.
In a sense, he precedes or starts the end a little bit earlier than the period actually would last. Okay?
In diesem Sinne, er fängt das Ende ein bisschen schneller an, als dass es sonst andauern wird.
And I want to suggest it's under the 7th plague.
Und ich möchte vorschlagen, dass das unter der 7. Plage ist. Also ich habe einen schönen Gedanke dazu.
Because on the 5th day of the 4th month, right,
Am 5. Tag des 4. Monats
in Ezekiel they see the rainbow.
in Hesekiel sehen die das Regenbogen.
Yes.
So they get delivered, they get covered, surrounded by a rainbow.
Yes.
Also sie werden
Before he comes.
noch vor Christus kommen, die werden umzingelt mit einem
So
Regenbogen.
when Daniel says, destroy not the wise men, whenever they raise their hands, they can't touch you anymore, the guns melt and all this sort of stuff.
Wenn Daniel sagt, zerstöre nicht den Weisen, so gerade hier, also hier in diesen, wenn sie ihre Waffen gegen dich erheben und so weiter, also sie brechen und fallen aus ihren Händen und so, die können dich nicht anhaben.
Okay, so this would be the deliverance here
So
already.
hier wäre das denn deine Befreiung.
And the same principle you can see here, this is the deliverance just before the period expires fully. Right?
Und in derselbe Weise hier ist der Befreiung, bevor der Zeit völlig abgelaufen ist. Well, if there's a prediction given here, that's the prediction that Christ coming back, right?
Yes.
Ja,
Right. The Father now proclaims day and hour. We will see this now.
also wir werden das jetzt sehen. Wenn es hier eine Vorhersage gibt, dann gibt es auch hier. Und das ist der Tag und Stunde Christi Wiederkunft.
Yes. Jump down to the end of page 4.
So kommt das Ende von Seite 4 herab.
Okay. And this is now from Great Controversy under the header the 7th last.
Und
The
das
7th
ist
plague.
unter große Kampf. Das ist große Kampf unter der Überschrift die 7. Plage.
It says, it is at midnight that God manifests his power for the deliverance of his people. So when is it?
So wann ist es?
Midnight. Right?
Mitternacht.
And we see it's midnight begins with the beginning of the 10.
Und wir können sehen, dass Mitternacht fängt mit der Anfang des 10 an.
So,
Das wäre dann hier.
yes. So in this sense, I will just mark it now here. Okay, the 10 here just to.
Also in diesem Sinne, ich markiere hier ein 10, nur so deswegen.
Midnight. Right.
Mitternacht.
Okay. And now it's the deliverance.
Und jetzt ist die Befreiung.
So then it says, the sun appears shining in its strength, signs and wonders follow in quick succession. The wicked look with terror and amazement upon the scene, while the righteous behold with solemn joy the tokens of their deliverance. So now there are tokens of their deliverance, right?
So, es gibt jetzt Zeichen ihrer Befreiung.
Everything in nature seems turned out of its course. The streams cease to flow. Dark heavy clouds come up and clash against each other. In the midst of the angry heavens is one clear space of indescribable glory, whence comes the voice of God like the sound of many waters, saying, "It is done." So what does it say here?
So, was sagt es hier?
It is done, right?
Es ist getan.
So yes. So and we understand that's all the ninth hour,
Und
right?
wir verstehen, dass das hier das Gesamte ist, die 9. Stunde.
And when this, what did Jesus say at the ninth hour?
Und was hat Jesus zur 9. Stunde gesagt?
It is done.
It is done.
Es ist
right?
vollbracht.
The deliverance of Jacob.
Yes.
Das ist die Befreiung Jakobs.
Okay. So, right? It is done.
Es ist getan.
Okay. And what happens now?
Was geschieht jetzt?
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
That voice shakes the heavens and the earth. There's a mighty earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. So what happens here?
So, was geschieht?
The nations start to get shaken
Yes.
badly.
Also die Nationen werden erschüttert.
So heaven plus earth get shaken.
Himmel und Erde werden erschüttert.
So brothers and sisters, if you don't get it up to now,
So, liebe Geschwister, wenn du es bis jetzt noch nicht geschnallt hast,
Because
this is this
also das hier ist das,
it's the
and this is this.
was auch das ist.
So in principle, under which plague are we at the moment?
So im Prinzip, unter welcher Plage befinden wir uns gerade?
Seventh plague.
Der 7.
Okay.
Plage.
but Revelation 6 is nice because it historically marks the shaking of the heavens and the earth.
Also Offenbarung 6,
Not Revelation 6, Revelation 8, sorry.
also Offenbarung 8 besser gesagt,
Yes. Okay.
das markiert historischerweise der Erschütterung der Himmel und Erde.
It's the fourth trumpet,
Yes.
right?
Der 4. Posaune,
Which is at the end, it says, verse 12.
Vers 12.
It says, the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So the third part of them was dark, and the day shone not for the third part of it, and the night likewise. So, and what's nice in verse 13, and I beheld an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe!" The 3 woes right in there. And this was historically filled when the Roman, basically the government fell apart. And it's the United States government falling apart.
Also das würde gesagt, wenn die Nation Rom auseinanderfiel, und gerade jetzt Amerika,
The Roman government.
die römische Regierung auseinanderfällt und gerade jetzt ist dasselbe mit den USA.
Yes.
Because they typify the United States.
Ja, Rom schattet den USA voraus.
Okay, so it's no accident that what happens at the moment in the United States
Also,
happens just now. Okay.
also es ist kein Zufall, dass das, was gerade in den USA stattfindet, dass es gerade jetzt stattfindet.
And therefore, alright, probably this thing will be much bigger than we can expect.
So, und dieses Ding wird wahrscheinlich viel größer sein, als dass wir es erwarten.
And it's the seventh plague in a miniature version.
Und das ist die 7. Plage in einer sehr Miniaturversion.
And when we go now to Revelation chapter 16,
Und wenn wir zur Offenbarung 16 gehen jetzt,
plagues,
spricht über die Plagen.
and let's just read verse 17 to 19.
Verse 17 bis 19.
Says, and the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. So it will be a great earthquake, brothers and sisters. Okay?
Es wird einen riesigen Erdbeben, liebe Geschwister.
And we understand earthquakes represent these political upheavals. Okay?
Und wir verstehen, dass Erdbeben markiert diese politische Streitigkeit.
Verse 19.
Vers 19.
And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell.
Oh,
So what comes upon the cities?
so was kommt auf die Städte?
The punishment
Eine
of the
Bestrafung
cities.
auf die Städte.
And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So what repeats under the 7th plague?
So was wiederholt sich unter der 7. Plage?
Yes, the wrath of God, right?
Also der Zorn
Because
Gottes.
it's typified in the final review.
Yes, and what is the wrath of God?
Was ist der Zorn Gottes?
Punishment of the cities.
Yes,
Die Bestrafung auf die
7 plagues.
Städte, ja.
yes, the 7
Die
plagues,
7
right?
Plagen.
So that therefore under the 7th plague you again have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Deswegen unter der 7. Plage hat man alle 7.
So it's therefore when they walk around
Jericho. Yes.
Jericho on the 7th day, right?
Das
They
ist
go around it 7 times.
Wie wenn sie um Jericho gehen, am 7. Tag gehen sie 7 Mal um Jericho herum.
And then the walls fall down.
Und dann kommt die Mauern runter.
And then here at the end the cities get smashed or
Und
punished.
hier am Ende die Städte werden zertrümmert oder bestraft.
Okay, right. So
By the hail, right?
yes,
Durch
The
Hagel.
The hail is the fire and brimstone.
yes.
Dieser Hagel ist diese Feuer und Schwefel.
I have a question.
Eine Frage habe ich.
When is the cup given to her?
Wann ist dieses Kelch sie gereicht?
Well, it's at the end, right?
You mean
Verse 19.
In
Whether
Vers
it's
19.
given here or here, you ask? The
I
beginning
mean,
of the
it
10 or
says-
the end? Of
Yeah, it says that the great city was divided 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell.
Yeah,
The
that's
great
it.
Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the feasts of his wrath. So it's when the punishment.
Das ist, wenn die Bestrafung kommt.
So it's the 7th plague of the 7th plague.
So, es wird dann der 7. von den 7 Plagen.
Because when you look at the destruction of Jericho, it's when they went round it the 7th time. That's when the wall fell.
Also es, bei der Zerstörung Jerichos, es war bei den 7. Mal am 7. Tag,
Okay.
wo sie herumgegangen sind, wo die Mauer fiel.
But I would have a question to this because isn't the cup of wine the whole 7 last plagues?
Also ich würde dann eine Frage dazu stellen, ist das Kelch des Weines nicht die gesamte 7 Plagen?
So in the sense that she gets the cup.
Yeah, but I mean, look,
Drinks it.
this is just a type, but the point is, it's the 7th plague when the cities fall.
Also es ist nur der Typus, aber der Punkt ist, es ist der 7. Plage, wo die Städte fallen.
There's nothing happening. What we see is chaos in America, right? We see their government's about to implode in on itself, right?
Wir sehen, es gibt Chaos in Amerika, also deren Regierung ist implodiert in sich selbst bald.
Okay, so, but the last thing that happens is the punishment on the cities.
Aber das Letzte, was geschieht, ist die Bestrafung auf die Städte.
That's for sure. Okay, so I hope that you could follow along,
So, ich hoffe, dass ihr folgen konnten.
and therefore this thing with Trump and Biden
Also dieses Ding mit Trump und Biden
might be much bigger than we can expect. Okay?
ist viel größer, als das wir vielleicht erwarten.
Even though it's just a type at the moment,
Selbst obwohl es gerade jetzt nur ein Typus
but
ist.
the 7th plague is basically the fulfillment of all the Bible, right? So this will be such an immense scale that even like a small miniature fulfillment of it at the moment will be already a big thing.
Aber die 7. Plage ist die Erfüllung der gesamten Bibel und selbst eine kleine Typus oder eine kleine Miniaturversion der 7. Plage, so wie wir jetzt gerade durchgehen, wird dennoch so riesig sein.
Amen.
Amen.
It's the battle of Armageddon.
Es ist der Kampf Armageddons.
Because the 7th plague is the battle of Armageddon.
Yes.
Und das ist der 7. Plage.
Okay. Therefore, we need to prepare ourselves to stand through this time, to remain faithful until the very end.
Deswegen müssen wir uns vorbereiten, dass wir in dieser Zeit treu bis zur ganzen Erde in dieser Zeit bleiben.
To the very end. Not du hast Erde gesagt.
Erde?
Mhm.
Really? Also bis zur ganzen Ende habe ich gemeint. Also für Erde.
And then we can obtain the blessing. and the
Und dann
fruits.
können wir die Segnung erhalten.
Amen?
Amen.
Okay, then let's close with our prayer.
So, lasst uns mit unserer Gebetsrunde abschließen.